Hello, and welcome to episode 85 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. I'm Patrick Stemp. Michael Ronn was not able to join us this week, but we do have John L. Monk with us, as always. John, how are you?
Hey, I'm good.
And we have a guest host joining us tonight, Erica Conroy. How are you, Erica?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me on.
No problem. Erica is one of the hosts of the Self-Publishing Roundtable and author of the Callisto Mega Bundle that she has on sale right now. We can talk about that as well a little bit later. And we have a guest this week, Stephen Campbell. How are you, Stephen?
I am well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And Stephen is the host of the Author Biz podcast and the crimefiction.fm podcasts, and we can talk about those as well. So first of all, we will do our weekly roundtable and talk about all of the books that we've been reading over the past week. And we will start with John. How's your reading been going?
It's been going really well this week, starting last week. I actually picked up and read Fat Vampire by Johnny B. Truant, and I needed something quick and fun, and I didn't know what to expect. I'd read their what is that one? The Yesterday's Gone series, and I liked it, but I wasn't sure how much to attribute to David Wright or to Johnny B. Truant, or to both. Well, I have to read something only by David Wright now to kind of really get the answer, but I'll say that Fat Vampire kicked ass.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, Yesterday's Gone was Sean Platt and David Wright. So
okay. Sorry.
Fat Vampire was just Johnny B. Truant. So
okay, so the mystery just gets deeper. Yeah, but I'll tell you,
it's hard to keep track of what those guys write.
It's a silly, campy, slightly serious, somewhat philosophical, damned interesting, damn well-written book. And in fact, I went ahead and I just purchased, and I got that one for free, but I bought book 2 and I'm like 60% through. I am loving the hell out of this thing. It's so good. Anybody, I'm not kidding you, pick up Fat Vampire and then send me a thank you. And I don't really know these guys. I mean, I'm Facebook friends with them, but like 100 million other indies. They don't know who I am or whatever, but pick it up. And it's also really well written and or rather edited to those of you out there who care about such things. It was pretty typo free.
And that book, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's about a fat guy who becomes a vampire. He's not really given the option of losing all the weight and getting the body that he has to spend eternity with. He kind of is thrown into it, and so he's not as fast or as smart as some of the other vampires, but he makes up for it in other ways. So yeah, it's an interesting take on the...
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what I didn't realize. I just told you how good it was. I didn't tell you what it was about. He's fat. He's not beautiful. He's not sleek. Nobody wants to kiss him and sparkle with him. Anyway, there you are. I yield the balance of my time back now.
That's your reading? Okay. Stephen, how about you? What have you been reading recently?
As you might guess from the name of one of my podcasts, crimefiction.fm, I read a lot of mysteries and thrillers, and I have a tendency to read a lot for the interviews that I'm doing. So this week I'm reading 2 things for interviews. The first is a book called Where It Hurts from Reed Farrell Coleman. It's coming out at the end of January, and it's sort of a noir thriller PI kind of thing. It is really, really well done. We recorded that interview today, and I felt stupid saying this, but it's one of my favorite books of the year. It's only January 19th, but I know at the end of the year it's still going to be on that favorites list. It would have been on my favorites list of last year. It's that good. It's just really good. I'm starting another one that's coming out in February called Saving Jason from Michael Sears. I love his work. He writes financial thrillers. His protagonist is a former Wall Street guy who lost his job in shame, and now he sort of works as a PI helping to uncover financial crime. And I love that kind of book. And I'm also working my way through a series. John mentioned getting the first book free and then buying the next book and so on, so on. I got the first book free for a series I don't even remember what the first book was called. It's the Nadia Wolf series. It's sort of romantic suspense. It takes place in Las Vegas, a female poker player. I got the first book like 2 years ago, and one of those books that you just get for free and you forget it. You forget about it. I had a break over Christmas with no podcasting at all, so I got to catch up on some reading, and I read the first book, loved it, bought the second book, loved it, bought the third book, and I'm halfway through the third book now. So that's my pleasure reading in between reading things for podcasts.
That's priceless.
Cool.
Yeah,
so
I
you do
didn't
get
read
to
like that too.
so you do get to read stuff outside of what you have on the books for the podcast.
I have to. I love reading the books that I read for the podcast, but if you don't, the TBR stack gets so big that you can never catch up.
Absolutely. So, Erica, would you like to tell us a little bit of what you've been reading lately?
Okay, well, I just finished reading up a book last week, and it was the fourth book in the Lord and Lady Hetheridge mystery series by Emma Jamieson, and it's called Black and Blue. It's very much a British mystery set in Scotland Yard, and it follows the main character as a 35-year-old woman from basically what the Americans would say the other side of the tracks. She's typically lower class, family has a history in crime, but she becomes a detective and joins Scotland Yard. She has, however, not left behind her prickliness and her bluntness, and so the first book in the series starts with her in a yelling match with her current supervisor, and I believe he calls her a carpet muncher, and she yells back at him that he's a big dick or something like this because he made a move on her the other night in the bar and she totally rejected him. So that just kind of sets the scene for what kind of a character she is, and she ends up being taken under the wing of the head of what they informally refer to as the Toff Squad. So there's an actual titled Lord who runs the head of this section, and they deal with any crimes, usually murders, that occur in the very upper, higher class areas of London. So, and it's all about them having a quick romance, falling in love, getting married, and then still managing to somehow work together while keeping the huge discrepancies in class going and dealing with how everyone else reacts to this or doesn't like it, while still solving mysteries in their essentially in their new neighborhood.
Cool, and that's a series?
Yeah, that's a series. The fourth one came out last year. I believe the fifth one's coming out soon this year. I think she's an indie author. I can't remember. I started reading the first one a couple of years back. And I look forward to when they come out, so that's always good. And it's very amusing, and she just has so many interesting characters which have their own unique voices in there. So you've got the criminal element, you've got the high-class criminal element, and then you've got the typical multicultural kind of London type of characters thrown in there as well, dealing with their daily lives, while also, solving their crimes.
Okay, cool. So I'll move on. I finished reading Swag, which John will be happy to hear. That's a book by Elmore Leonard. And I sort of wanted to read some more Elmore Leonard after we started our second run through of watching Justified. We just finished rewatching season 2 tonight. Actually, such a great show. I think there'll probably be a third run through watching this show again once we're done. So I wanted to actually read some more Elmore Leonard. I haven't read him in a while. I think since like Maximum Bob back in the day. So I hadn't read this one, picked it up. It's about a car salesman and a car thief who sort of join forces to basically just rob everyone blind in town, all of the stores, and pretty much any place they see that they like and they think they can get some money from. And there's a sort of bigger heist later on. There isn't a whole heck of a lot of story going on. Like it's more sort of like that slice of life. He paints a picture of these two guys, and it's more about sort of what they're doing and their downtime in between jobs, living in this. It's kind of like a motel, but it's not, like an apartment complex with all these pretty girls that hang around the pool all day long because they don't have anywhere else to be, and the parties that they have in the apartment, and what they do with their money, and they start out with this top 10 list. John mentioned I think last week of the rules of how to get away with this stuff and not get caught and always be polite during a job and that kind of stuff. It's interesting. So it was good. Of course, the one thing that stands out with Elmore Leonard is his dialogue. That's probably the best part of the story, is listening to these two guys talk. And I would put him obviously up there with dialogue with Higgins, who I was mentioning to you before, John, as well, to read like Rat on Fire. Both geniuses with dialogue. So, are you reading the sequel to that now?
No, I got too many things on my TBR list, unfortunately, because I started this show. So I gotta wait.
Well, you do need to have to put it on the list. I haven't picked that one up. Actually, I'm not 100% sure it's even out yet, but it's definitely coming.
It better be, because he's dead,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just called Stick.
I don't mean to laugh, but yes,
so I enjoyed that.
I think it's out.
I started reading, or I continued sort of slowly working my way through, because of some of the other stuff I'm reading, Sharkskin Sweet by Tim Dorsey. So I haven't read Dorsey in probably a couple years, because I'm going to say this is book 19, I think, of the Sir J. Storms stories. They take place in Florida, and they're sort of crime novels, but of course he's the criminal. And they're a lot of fun. And then I picked up a book called Make a Scene by Jordan Rosenfeld. I just kind of came across this one by accident, but it's a craft book on crafting scenes and the different types of scenes. And it just I downloaded the sample. I think it's in Kindle Unlimited right now. I figured I'd check it out, and it's pretty good so far. And then I continued my reading of The Rook, which, if you're keeping up, John, you should be coming up on 75% through that book, so we can talk about it at the end of the month.
I'm about 40%. So
okay.
It's a fast read, but I found out. Remember, I thought it was last week I thought it was going to be this week that we were going to talk about it. So I started reading it too soon, and I knew I had to pad it out with some other reading. Thus, Fat Vampire, short enough, and free. So
there you go. So that's my reading for the week.
Sweet.
And we can move on and have a chat with our guest. So you have you do 2 podcasts, and one of them focuses on crime fiction, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And as that is your sort of obviously your passion there, is that mostly the focus on the Author Biz as well, or does that kind of go genre wide?
There's no genre at all with the Author Biz, although the people that I know tend to be mystery and thriller writers, so it's more focused with authors like that. But I speak to a lot of people that have written author marketing books, things like that. I'm just looking for interesting stories. I have an interview scheduled tomorrow with a guy who, on November 3rd, he sold the first copy of his first book, and his revenue was $2.99, and he made $2, or whatever the number is. Yesterday, he's up to 5 books now. He'd actually written a few of them ahead of time. He had a plan. He's up to 5 of them. His revenue yesterday was $700, and he's on track to go over $10,000 this month, and this is in 3 months. It's an impressive story. So those are the kinds of things that are sort of fun. I'll hear about somebody like that, and they make great guests. And this guy is super willing to share numbers. I have a copy of his Amazon spreadsheet that he updates every day, and I've been tracking it for the last month, and it's astonishing because he's written these books. They're paranormal books. They're not the kind of thing I would normally read, or they're not the kind of thing I would read, period. But he's found an audience, and he's found some very inexpensive ways to market the books. And the things, we all do the same things to market our books, but he came at it out of ignorance. He didn't really know what to do, so he just tried a bunch of different things, all of them inexpensive. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but he's done very well. So I like to find people like that for the Author Biz. And for the other show, crimefiction.fm, it's essentially books that I like. If you write a good story, whether you're traditionally published, indie published, whatever, if I like the book, you're a candidate to be a guest on that show.
Yeah. I actually was on the show.
John was on the show. He wrote Thief's Odyssey, which was one of the books that I really enjoyed last year. I love a good caper novel, and that's what Thief's Odyssey was. I wish he would write more of those kinds of books and get away from this other stuff.
You know, Stephen, the funny thing is I would write more of the Thief's Odyssey book because I think it's good, but the research it took was really kind of tough. And so anyway, it's not about me, but I actually have some questions for you. I'm kind of curious. So like it seems really unusual to me that you're a podcaster who interviews authors about their books, you know, specifically Crime Fiction FM, and you read every damn book that everybody writes who's on your show. You know, when I watch the Today Show and they bring somebody on, nobody's read their books, or some political show, somebody wrote a book, you know, they have them on and they haven't read their book, they looked at the title, but you read every single one. How fast do you read, man?
Pretty fast, and sometimes to my detriment, because you miss things when you're reading that fast. I am, in a lot of cases, if a book doesn't grab me right away, I'm speed reading it through to get the story. If it does, I read it more slowly, absorb the nuance of the book and the language, and it could be anything that grabs me. It could be a character, it could be a setting, any one of those things. But some books just don't have that. They just have a good story. And I always try and get a sense of the story before I speak to the guest, because you're so right, and people are shocked to find that I've read the book.
So I'm not the only one.
I've had big-time authors at the end of an interview after we're done recording say, "You're the only person I've talked to today. I've done 20 interviews today, and you're the only one who's read the book."
I believe that. It's
well, they can tell because you have a different kind of conversation with someone if they haven't read the book compared to if they have, just based on the questions they're asking you.
Yeah, and you know, when you do this kind of an interview, and you probably get this stuff as well, Erica, that you'll get a sheet from the author or a publicist or something that explains the book. And I think a lot of people read the sheet, they can glean a couple questions from that, and they're good to go. But I know how hard it is to write a book, and it seems like you're doing a disservice to the author if you don't read the book prior to speaking to them about the book.
So how far ahead are you? So you mentioned that there's someone you're excited to talk to tomorrow. You record tomorrow. How long is it before that episode will come out on the feed?
That episode is an Author Biz episode. It's coming out on Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to shoot for Monday. I'm not sure it's going to happen. Crimefiction.fm, I try and if I find out far enough, if the interview is scheduled far enough in advance, I'll try and release the podcast on the day the book comes out. So for traditionally published books, they generally come out, especially the big books, come out on Tuesdays. An indie book might come out anywhere. Smaller publishers might come out on any day. But I try and do that if I can. So I've gone as far as 3 months out, where I'll record the interview 3 months ahead of time.
So with the scheduling like that, I guess I have to ask, and of course without naming names, like if you're scheduling these out, and maybe you're scheduling interviews before you've read the book sometimes, right?
Well, I schedule the interview, but I'll record the interview sometimes 3 months ahead of time, but not until after I've read the book.
Okay, because that was going to be my question. What happens if you book an interview and then you hate the book?
It's only happened once, because normally I will look at the book first, and this was somebody whose work I really trusted because I'd read it before, and it was just a clunker of a book. And I felt bad because there really weren't many good things I could say about it, so I just let them talk about it and went on.
Interesting. That's because that's a tough thing, I think, for all of us on here is drawing that line between, because we all either want to be or are authors already, and it's tough to we're all avid readers, so you want to talk about the books you love, but sometimes you come across the ones that you don't, and usually it's probably best just not to talk about them at all then, right? Because we don't want to.
And I'm never going to be critical of someone's book, especially if I'm talking to them about it. I'll ask them questions and put them in the best light possible. But
Thanks.
The book has to. I loved your book, John. You know I did.
Thank you. The truth comes out.
The worst thing, and I'm sure you guys have had this, is you'll be into the interview and you'll reach the point where you'll say, "Tell us about the book," and you get one sentence, and then they stop, and then you're like, "Okay, we've got 19 more minutes to fill," and I bet 10% of the time I have to explain the book because a lot of indie authors are not used to doing interviews, and so. I've had situations where they've told too much, and then I'll just stop the recording and say, "Do you want to really want to give all that away? Do you want to go back and do that again?" And
you did that with me, actually.
Were you one of those?
Yeah. I gave away like one of the best jokes in the book. I won't give it away here. But it was the best joke in the book. I was trying to give an example about how the book is funny, and then I went listening for it when you did the podcast, and it was gone. Yeah? And incidentally, I want to interrupt again because that's what I do now. So Steve is an incredible podcaster. He knows that this is wrong. Like making noises that you can hear. He did a show recently where he just talked about how to behave on podcasts, and of course I break every rule. It was on the Author Biz, not Crime Fiction FM. It was like 3 episodes ago. I thought it was incredible. But anyway, yeah, he gives you lots of advice when you're on his show. Like before it starts, he's like, "Don't say as you're waiting to come up with what you're going to say," because what he likes to do is he likes to edit out the kind of areas in the middle that maybe don't sound too well or something, and you can't do that if you have an kind of going on. So he's got this whole thing down to a science. Yeah. Anyway, so go ahead. What were you saying? You don't know what you're saying.
Well, okay. Yeah, I mean, you're right, and that takes time. I am so envious of the way you guys do this show. You start at 8 o'clock, you click the record button, and when it's done, it's done. And you've got video. I don't know how the audio gets to iTunes. So you must be hosting it somewhere. And I'm assuming you don't edit it. It's just exactly the same thing. Is that correct?
Can't hear you, Patrick. Is your mute on?
Sorry, I was muted there. That's something that I might want to edit out, but I won't. I was going to say I think the only time I've actually edited was last week when the audio kind of started off and John and Michael were kind of making some noises before it started. But yeah, we host it up on Libsyn.
Okay.
I typically it takes me half an hour to, if YouTube and Google are cooperating, to download the MP4, extract the MP3, and just kind of, put it in YouTube, add all the tags and all that kind of stuff, and get it uploaded. We love doing the podcast, but we don't want to turn it into a full-time job at the same time.
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah, we operate the same way on the self-publishing roundtable. But Secret Savior who does that, not me. So.
Yeah, I hear about all these people that have these assistants that do all this stuff for you, but I am not one of those people.
Oh, he's not an assistant. He's one of the co-hosts. We just divide up the tasks amongst us, so we don't have as much, to make it even and delegate it and make it fair.
So how long does it take you to produce one of your episodes?
In general, it takes me 3 minutes for each minute of audio.
Wow.
And that's pretty much soup to nuts, from writing the show notes to editing the audio and finding the image, all of that stuff.
Oh, that's great.
And when I started the Author Biz, the interviews were like an hour or sometimes an hour and 15 minutes, and multiply that times 3, and it becomes a commitment. And so I tightened the show up quite a bit. Now I shoot for 20 minutes on the Author Biz, and I usually wind up about 30 minutes.
Oh, so that's not too bad, even at 3 minutes per minute of audio.
Bad.
It's not a full-time job, so that's good. So do you have a all-time favorite crime author? If you had to pick one?
I do, and I have. Well, I mean, it goes without saying. I'm not going to embarrass anyone on the panel by naming them.
Thank you.
I have favorite authors and a single favorite living author. And my favorite living author is a woman named Taylor Stevens. I also host a podcast with her that's on writing. And if you listen to any of my shows, you've probably heard Taylor on as a guest. I love her writing. I love her books. I love the way she develops characters. It's like a real literary mystery or thriller. I just love that. But the non-living, John D. MacDonald, Elmore Leonard, Robert B. Parker, the legends. I've been reading those books since I was 14 years old. I live in Florida now because of John D. MacDonald from reading those Travis McGee books.
Yeah, I've read a few of those, but I definitely want to read more. I think I was reading them out of order. I went back. I think last year I read the first one, and then I can't remember if I think I then set the series aside at that. But I love those books. And I can never remember. It's Slip. What's the address of the houseboat?
Slip F-18, Bahia Mar, Florida. And there actually is, or there was up to maybe a few years ago. I think it might be gone now. But I live in Naples, Florida, which is right across the way from Fort Lauderdale, which is where Bahia Mar is. And so you could drive over, and Slip F-18 was sitting there open, waiting for the busted flush to come back.
And there was like a plaque there or something,
yes.
right?
Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And you can read those books in any order. Like once you get past the first 3, if you read the first one, you should probably read the second and the third, and then after that, any order at all is fine.
Yeah, I seem to remember I was reading them out of order, and one of the things that threw me off, this was a few years ago, and I think it's book 3. It isn't a Florida crime novel. He ends up in like Texas or something. It kind of turns into the Old West, which was, it wasn't a bad book or anything. It just wasn't what I was expecting, a Florida crime novel.
Yeah, and what do you think about that when a series author does that? Because we read these books because in many instances we love the setting. We love the characters in the setting. But then the author will take the character out of the setting. For me, it upsets me a little bit. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I can't like the Tim Dorsey books. Like I said, I mean he's coming up on 20 there. I like Carl Hyacin, and Florida for both of those authors is a character in itself, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Tim Dorsey's character Serge is a history buff. Massive history buff when it comes to Florida and all the movies that were shot there and all of these crazy locations that I have a feeling probably actually exist. And you pull them out of Florida, and you've lost. It'd be like Star Wars without C-3PO or something. I don't know. Like they kind of need to be there.
Well, I can remember, and I was reading the John D. MacDonald books as they came out. So I'd go to the bookstore and look, and there's a new one, and I'd grab it, take it home, and it would be like every 5th or 6th book wouldn't be in Florida, and I would just like drop my head and bang it on the desk when that would happen. I know I'd still enjoy the book, but it just wouldn't be the same for me.
Well, you know why authors
especially
do that,
back in the
right?
day. Go ahead, Erica.
You know why authors do that, right? They're doing it to liven things up again because they think it's a good way to bring in something fresh and new and entertaining. It's either to reinvent it for themselves or just to show something completely different. Or, sometimes it's that whole fish out of water scenario for the main character. But I mean, every 5th or 6th book, I think I'd be annoyed with that as well.
So what would you think if your British detective that you were reading earlier, all of a sudden they sent her to Albuquerque?
Yeah, that'd be really odd, and there'd be no real reason for it. I mean, why would they send her to Albuquerque? It just doesn't.
There's lots of great stuff
there.
in Albuquerque.
Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with Albuquerque. I'd love to be in Albuquerque right now.
Yeah. That's interesting, though, like you say, Erica, because it probably is somewhat, too, because the author wants to keep it fresh for themselves so they don't just get sick of the character and decide to kill them in the series because they're bored of it, right?
Yeah. It's when you start writing a new series to keep yourself interested in the old one.
So I'm assuming, obviously, you've read a lot of, or probably all of Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler.
I won't say that I've read it all, but I've read a lot. I've certainly read all of Elmore Leonard, and I can tell you that Stick came out about 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. You mentioned that earlier. But
was it as good as Swag?
I think I liked it a little bit better, but it was a long time ago that I read it.
It must be a re-release then that they did.
They're probably re-releasing them all. Because he didn't write a series, and every so often a character would reappear. It's just these unique characters. It takes a minute to bring the storyline back to my mind for those books.
And then so I read like the Hammett and Chandler back when L.A. Noire came out, a game that kind of got me interested in the genre, and that led me to another author. I was wondering if you'd read Derek Raymond.
No.
So he's the founder of British Noir, and he wrote a series of books called the Factory series, and it's pretty dark stuff, and it's very British. Like there's some, you have to get comfortable with the language, and it's about a sort of down and out cop, and he's part of a team that's sort of tasked with solving the murders that nobody really cares about.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always at odds with the guys the other cops who think they're hot because they get to solve the crimes that are in the newspaper, and but it's a great series, but very dark.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I used to read a lot of really dark books, and I really enjoyed them. And then we had two sons that were in the Marines, and when they were overseas, I found that I couldn't read things like that. So I transitioned my reading away from the really dark stuff, and I started reading more traditional mysteries. And I'm, working my way through some Agatha Christie things that I hadn't read in the past. And now that the boys are back, everyone's safe, I can go back to read the dark stuff again, and it won't keep me awake all night.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Let me see. I actually have a question. What is it here? What kind of books do you think readers are dying to find in crime fiction but can't get their hands on? Like, I would think that it would be, books told from like a cat burglar's perspective, because there's like a million books out there from like detectives. But that's just me. Like in fantasy, I'd say books told from a wizard's perspective, because there really aren't that many. It's always some guy with a sword or something like that. But what do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think you said that somewhat tongue-in-cheek with the idea of the cat burglar, but I
actually think that's true.
I personally,
really
I agree with you. I don't think there are enough books written from the perspective of the burglar. There's one guy, I know I talked to you about him. His name is Wallace Strobe, who writes a series featuring a character called Chrissa Stone. I love those books. They're gritty. She is a loner, hardcore thief. And in each book, she gets together with a few different people. They're constantly double-crossing one another. They're fun books. Caper books, like the Bernie Rodenbar books.
I love those.
Yeah, I mean, those are they're fantastic. And they're so much fun. But there aren't very many of them, and I don't understand why. I guess it's because the readers aren't clamoring for them. I am. Whenever I see anything remotely like that, I try it.
What's the name of it again?
Which one?
The one you just mentioned.
The most recent book was The Devil's Share, and the author is Wallace Strobe. I think the first book or maybe the second one, with a brilliant title, Shoot the Woman First.
That sounds really cool.
I love that series. I think there are 4 books in it now, and there'll be another one out this spring. But it's just a fantastic. He was a newspaper man in New Jersey, and he just has that gritty way of writing and developing characters that I really enjoy. And like you said with your book, there's a lot of work that goes into researching the perfect crime and to be able to get these things to work.
What other
it sounds
types
to me?
Oh, good.
So I was to say, based on what you were saying there too, I was wondering if you had seen the movie Heist.
Yes.
Gene Hackman. That's got to be my all-time favorite heist movie, appropriately named. I love heist movies, and that's for anyone who hasn't seen it. Gene Hackman, Sam Rockwell, Danny DeVito, and I love Delroy Lindo.
Yes.
He's one of my favorite actors, and he's great in this too.
He's great in everything.
Check that out. Yeah,
and he's in a lot of those caperish kind of movies.
And The Core, one of my guilty pleasure movies. And go ahead, John. You were going to ask something.
I was just going to say, other than the self-serving thief books, what are the things that you think are really rare in crime fiction and you just love when you uncover? Like I said, I love it when there's a story from a wizard's perspective, like Ramini Feast's Magician's Apprentice. But there's so few because the wizards have unlimited power and they can solve all their problems with magic. So you very rarely see it done well. It's always a sword-swinging swashbuckler type who eventually gets power and then they end the series or something like that. So other than thief stuff, I mean, what would you say is probably kind of underrepresented?
Well,
you just love seeing it.
There are different ways of presenting the standard things. That a police procedural. A police procedural is a police procedural is a police procedural. But there are different ways of doing it. And I read one in the fourth quarter of last year called Lie Catchers. And the author was Paul Bishop. It was an indie book, and Paul was an L.A. police officer, and he was an interrogator. And so this was a police procedural written from the perspective of an interrogator. I'd never read a book like that before. So it's taking a standard and sort of spinning it around a little bit to make it really unique. And this was a fantastic character. I hope it's the start of a series. But it was one of my favorite books of last year. I really enjoyed that one.
Lie Catcher?
Lie Catcher, yeah. Or Lie Catchers, there might be an S at the end. The author's Paul Bishop. And he, by the way, you probably don't know this. This is really niche-y. He and a friend started a series of books that were written by a group of different authors called the Fight Card series, where a lot of indie authors sort of got their start by writing a fight card book prior to becoming well known. And they're all like 120 page novella kind of things, and they all focused on the world of professional fighting. And so there was a sort of a common theme in all of the books, and they all sort of took place in the 50s and 60s. And then it started expanding. But that was a cool, fun series. But a lot of people, I'm drawing a blank on a name, but some very well-known indie authors wrote those books.
You had him on your show, I believe, didn't you?
I did. I had him on one show talking about that, and then he came out with Lie Catchers, like right after that, or maybe it was like the week before, and I read it, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic.
Yeah, that was a lot of shows ago. I remember that.
Yeah.
Do you read a lot of Lawrence Block?
I love Lawrence Block, and I had the opportunity to interview him, and I will say that I have been nervous for 2 interviews. He was one of them.
Who was the other?
Well, the first time I interviewed Taylor Stevens, who was, I mentioned, my favorite living author, I was a wreck. And, we since have become friends and do a show together. But Lawrence Block could not have been nicer. And that was a blast talking to him. And that was a crimefiction.fm interview that could have also played on the Author Biz because we started talking about the changes in the business. I don't know if you guys know this, but he published one of the most recent Bernie Rodenbar book, which is a thief book. He self-published it. So his contractor, the most recent one was self-published. So
I'm not terribly surprised by that because I know he's very active. I mean, he's got his own. He's one of the few big name, I think, traditionally published authors that I've seen with a mailing list.
Yes.
That he actively emails, not 1,000 times a year or anything, but he talks about his walking that he's a huge fan of, and whatever Matthew Scudder book is coming next, and so I'm not too surprised that he jumped on that.
I was actually shocked, and I probably shouldn't have been when it happened because I couldn't believe a publisher would have dropped that series. But that's what they do.
He's a nice guy too. He wrote me back, and I'm nobody. I sent him some fan mail because I love the Bernie books. Rodenbar. I can never really say it.
I'm pretty sure it's Rodenbar.
I would love. I have a request. I would love if you could get him on the Author Biz, for like an hour. That would be awesome.
Well, I think I could. He's just written. He wrote a book on writing, I don't know, like a decade ago, and he just republished it. He updated it and republished it. So I
think I downloaded that. It's based on his series that he did with his wife. I think they traveled around doing like seminars for writers.
It may be.
I think I just downloaded that. But I was going to say, John, like, what are you doing? 2 degrees of separation. You should be asking him to get him on TBR.
Exactly.
Get him on our podcast. We've had Andy Weir. Lawrence Block was a good.
You had Andy Weir?
Before the movie came out, going back mid last year, I think.
What a great story that whole thing is.
Oh, he's a really nice guy too. He was just so approachable, and it's just we pinged him on Facebook just because he's on Facebook, and just said out of curiosity, asked if he'd like to come on and chat with some avid readers, and he was like, "Yep, sure, just tell me when." And actually, we gave him a bunch of dates. He said, "Well, how about tomorrow?" kind of thing. So. So we didn't have time to get nervous, but he's a great guy.
It's funny, and I'm sure you guys get the same thing, but I have people ask me all the time, how do you get so-and-so to do your show? And the answer is you ask them. And they almost, I've done probably 250 podcasts, and I've been turned down once. Actually, twice by the same person. But I've only had one person turn me down.
And do you find that any of that or some of it is because a lot of authors that you might want to talk to, you have a gatekeeper where they're not running their own social media. Mm-hmm. So you're not really talking to Stephen King. You're talking to his assistant or whatever, right. and they're there for the express purpose of keeping people like us away, right? So you're able to you find yourself having to work through them, or you get able to get a hold of the author.
I will occasionally. I'm going to say maybe 5% of the time on the really top level authors, they'll say yes, I would love to do it. I'll have my assistant contact you and work it out, and sometimes that can be a tedious process. And I think in some instances that's just sort of a polite way of saying I don't really want to do this, but I don't want to say no, so I'm going to push it off on somebody else. But I just keep pushing, and eventually they do it. And there's very often just a window where they've got a new book coming out and they're spending a full week doing this stuff, and so sure, we'll slot you in during that week.
Have you talked to or read Joel Goldman?
I have not talked to him, and I've interviewed a bunch of their authors. You're talking about the guy that is partnering with Lee Goldberg.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, with Brash Books. I've interviewed a bunch of their authors. I have not interviewed him, but he wrote with a woman, I can't remember her name, a book last year that was a caper thief book that was really enjoyable.
Yeah, I haven't read that, and the reason I thought of him was just because back 2-3 years ago when I was just starting to get interested in this whole independent author thing, and he was actually one of the very first indie authors that I came across, and I can't remember how or why, but he was somebody that again, just very approachable. I read a couple of his books and really liked them, and this is long before we started the podcast, but sent him an email and back and forth, and he let me read an arc of his upcoming book, and so it's been interesting to see his progress too.
And I really recommend that book. I wish I could remember the title of it, but I think it came out like September or October of last year, and he posted something on Facebook, and I read the blurb, and I'm like, that looks like fun. And so I don't know, bought it or whatever. Maybe it was Kindle Unlimited. I don't remember. But it was just one of those, sort of a guilty pleasure kind of a book, but really enjoyable. Not the kind of thing that you would recommend to your highbrow reader friends, but if you have friends that just really love a good story with a happy ending, this was a good book.
And his, I try to remember the name of the character because his stories were interesting too. Like, Lawrence Block has Matthew Scudder, and of course that character is struggling with alcoholism through all of the books. And Joel Goldman has a condition, and I can't remember what it's called, but his main character in one of his series also has sort of a condition that basically makes him kind of seize up, like his nervous system just kind of seizes up on him, and he can't, do anything, and stressful situations make that more likely to happen. So of course, as the books are going on and he's in these terrible situations that he's trying to resolve, it becomes more likely that he's going to just kind of seize up like that. And that Lawrence Block book, I do have it downloaded. It's called Write for Your Life.
Okay, all right.
If anyone's wondering.
And that's the one he just re-released?
Yeah, he just re-released it, and there's a new introduction. He's talking about sort of the genesis of that series of talks that he was doing around the country, and why he stopped and why he turned it into a book. And
you mentioned, in a roundabout way, we mentioned Lee Goldberg, who's writing I don't even know what the name of the series is. It's sort of a heist series with Janet Ivanovich, and that's another one of those caper heist kind of series, and that's doing incredibly well. So I guess there is a market for this. There aren't a lot of people writing into that particular market. Have you read? Have any of you read any of those, the Goldberg Ivanovich books?
I haven't. Now I want to. So.
Okay. I mean, they are really good. They're quick reads, and again, not the kind of thing that you hand to your highbrow literary reading friend, but they're very entertaining.
We're not very highbrow here.
No,
and you can tell from my reading habits that I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
I got some questions. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I've got a question too. It's just changing the topic slightly. Now, Steve, you on your website it says that you are also a budding author. So yes. You've got the one book out at the moment, of Jack and Jessica?
It was actually the first thing that I published. I wanted to see it was sort of a part of an experiment to gain knowledge for the Author Biz. I wanted to see what the process was like to publish a book, and so it's just a short story, and that's the only thing I've done. And then I wrote another book, and I slaved over it for like 6 months and edited it and more, and 6 months later it was ready, and I sent it off to an editor. And they came back and essentially just shredded me, and it was devastating. And so I put that aside and didn't do anything for like a month. And an author friend was just badgering me every day. What are you writing? What are you writing? What are you writing? It's like nothing right now. I'm going to go back and fix this book. And she said, just write something completely different. So I did, and in completely different, I changed the gender of the protagonist, I changed the point of view, I changed everything, completely different city, different story, different everything, and I started writing a short story that became a novel. But by the time I finished it, the character had changed. So then I went back and wrote a series of short stories so that I could better understand the character prior to going back and editing that book. And those stories have gone through developmental edits, and now they're in copy edits. Those will be out in next month sometime. So I'm really happy about that. I'm really happy. The writing is so much better than it was with the first thing that no one will ever see. And now I can go back and correct the story, which is pretty good. The story for the book that I wrote last is pretty good, and now I understand the character, so I have to go back and change some things in there and flesh things out. But I'm excited to get started on that project.
What do you mean that they shredded you? I mean, I've submitted books at traditional publishers, and they usually don't respond, and if they do, it's just like...
No, this was a paid editor. No, this was someone that I paid a good bit of money to, and it was, I won't say they were a friend. It was someone that I knew, and they did it in the nicest possible way, and I appreciated it because everything they said was absolutely true. It was just hard to hear, and then I went back and tried to fix all of the things that were wrong, and there was just too much. I didn't know how to do it. So when my friend said, just do something completely different, I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And it just kind of went from there. The short story just kept going and going and going. One of those things, every morning you get up and you write 2,000 words and you feel really great about it, and the next day you do it again, and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of words.
Right.
And then you put it into the form of a story, and you realize the character started here and wound up here, and you're not really sure who she is yet. And that's why I went back and wrote the short story. So now I know exactly who she is, and I'm going to go back and really change the structure of the book, but the story will be the same.
Will you also be releasing those short stories as well?
I will. Those will be out sometime in February.
Follow-up question. What was the ripping to shreds story-based, or was it prose-based? Like
it was a combination of everything. Wooden. It was story structure, like probably every single person who tries to write their first novel. We spend way too long getting the story going. So I sent it to them, and like the first cut was like, you'd be better off just starting the story here. So that's what I did. I went back and I started the story here. But then when I sent it back to them and the other partner went through it, she's like, you've got a murder mystery here, and the body doesn't drop until like page 60. And I've read 1 million mysteries, and I'm like, how did I not see that? But I didn't. And so it's things like that.
What did you say?
I didn't kill anybody until it's a murder mystery without a victim for a long period of time. So yeah, and it's like she knew exactly who the killer was from 2 minutes after the body dropped, things like that. And so I was going to have to completely restructure the story, put the murder in the beginning. I was going to have to change some characters because some things that I thought were really good, they thought was just absolute dreck. It was tough. It was a tough thing, and I spent like a couple hours on the phone just going through all these different things, and I was so thankful to hear it all because I'm thankful that they didn't say, wow, we're just going to copy edit this and tell you it's great and let you put it out, because some people will do that.
Yeah.
I was thinking earlier too. I don't know why, but and because we mentioned the movie, but I was thinking like watching a lot of movies too. I think can kind of help with developing that kind of story structure quickly. And the movie that has struck out for me, I think, in this genre more than any was The Maltese Falcon, just because I can't think of another movie that is a shot for shot, scene for scene, like dialogue, just beat by beat copy paste of the book, which is pretty amazing.
I've never read the book. I've seen the movie a dozen times. I've never read the book.
If you've seen the movie, you've read the book. It's interesting. Like I've never seen that before. But yeah, that's got to be tough being ripped to shreds, and I'm sure all of us have either been there or will be.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was sort of paying dues a little bit, and again, I was thankful for it because it would have been far worse to put this thing out.
And I'm sure you were able to take those lessons and apply them to the next thing, right?
Yes.
Even though you didn't go back and apply them to the thing, I'm sure you took a lot out of it.
Yes, and I still have this feeling inside that I should go back to this because it's just there's something about leaving a project at that stage, but it might be better to just say, just move on. So I don't. What do you guys think?
I think it depends on if you're still interested in it, if you're still feeling it.
I like the characters.
I got a question. Are you sure they were 100% accurate? I mean...
no, I'm not sure they were 100% accurate. But okay. I am 100% confident that they knew a lot more than I did at the time. But it was obvious. Some of the things were obvious. Some of them I disagreed. Some of them I disagreed with. But I just took it while I was listening, trying to just absorb their knowledge.
Here's the thing about editors. Once they take a set against the novel, and it's not like a personal thing. It's not like what it is once you see once you've lost your willing suspension of disbelief, once you've been bored a little bit at one point, all the things that you would be flying through as a lover of a book, you're now looking at cross-eyed and shaking your head, and you're going to have a problem with absolutely everything. Now, it could be that the book is that flawed, but if the book was just in need of a light editing and some structural changes, there's a chance that maybe they were a little harsher than it needed to be. Now, I haven't read your work, and after what I've heard, no, I'm just kidding. I haven't read the work. They could be right, but they could also be wrong. I'll give you a case in point. My book, Thief's Odyssey, which I keep bringing up because I'm not trying to get your money. Okay?
What was that title again?
Thief's Odyssey. No, what it is I was told I got ripped to shreds by my editor, who then also, sort of without exactly saying it, was kind of saying that I was a racist, because there was there's a black pimp in the book, in D.C., which is, I know there are no black pimps in D.C. I just know this.
Yeah, you were going against typecasting there.
I was totally going against typecasting and putting a black pimp in. So I got the sort of racist thing a little bit from my editor, and I did my best to tone that down a little bit. I removed like 5 double negatives that didn't need to be there. So anyway, my point is I got ripped to shreds. You somehow liked the book. If I got ripped to shreds, how did you like the book? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There you go.
And you can always disagree with what the editor says. It's really up to you to pick and choose what
That's right.
What to actually let through and what not to change.
I'm going to go back to it. Now you've convinced me to go back to it.
Ripped to shreds, guys. I really was.
Personally, I think you shouldn't go back to it. I mean, you said you like the characters, so write something new with the characters.
I actually did. After that, well, while it was in the process of, they were evaluating it and figuring out where to stick the knife in, I was working on the sequel. And I'm sad to say the sequel wasn't really that much better based on what they were saying, because it was a little bit better. It would be, if I rewrote it now, it would be a lot better.
Can you send it to me? I'll take a look at it, and I'll tell you. I'll give you a first chapter read. I don't have a lot of time, but okay. I'll give you like first 1 or 2 chapters, and I'll just tell you, like, at the very least, like, if I have any issues with the prose.
Burn it.
I'm really kind of a judgmental a-hole a little bit. So like when I read stuff that has an issue with the prose, I usually give people, like, as best I can, the negative feedback, but you've already gotten the worst, so it's not going to be any issue.
Yeah,
for me.
You'd be hard pressed to be any harsher than she was.
I can give you the prose, okay? I can't give you the story structure because I'm only going to read a little bit at the moment because just time. I've got to do a lot of stuff. But if you send it to me, I'll take a look at it.
Okay, I'll do it.
Thanks.
So there you go, and we're coming up on, if not already past an hour, which is extremely long for us, but a lot of fun. So any sort of last-minute questions from anyone before we start to wrap things up?
Yeah, I got a really quick one. I'm sorry. I've been dying to be on with Steve Campbell for a long time in person.
Hey, you had your own
with
show
like
with
visual.
me.
Yeah, well, I only got like 15 minutes last time. So, okay. How many times do you get the following requests? Read my book. Oh my God, read my book. Please read my book. Second one would be, can I be on your show? Can I be on your show? Please, can I be on your show? How often does that happen?
All the
Only
time.
ever from John.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time.
All
And
the
you know, the
time.
funny thing is, and I'm sure you guys face the same thing. It's like with John, if I knew he'd written a book and I wanted to have him on the show. I knew he'd written a book that would fit the show. I read the book. I liked it. I wanted to have him on the show. But I knew John because he had commented on the website. He had emailed me to say, hey, I really enjoyed this. Could you do this? This would be great. You know, keep up the good work, that kind of thing. So we had a relationship, and then we decided to do a show together. What people do that is just so wrong is to just come out of left field where there's no relationship at all, not even like a Facebook post like, and they're saying, hey, can I be on your show? And that can be a little off-putting when it's the 103rd request in a given week.
Wow, that's a lot of requests.
Well, I'm exaggerating.
Do they include the book in the email?
No. Surprisingly enough, then you'll have to say, I'll go to Amazon typically, rather than say send me the book and then say no, I have absolutely no interest in this book. I'll go to Amazon and download the sample, and I can usually tell in the first 10% of the book if it's something that I would be interested in, and if I'm interested in it, then my audience would be interested in it.
Right. Okay.
So this will teach you to have another podcast host on the show. We go way long, and I talk too much. So sorry about that.
No, that's no problem at all. It's been fun.
That's a good answer.
And did you have any other questions, John? Yeah, I know you came with a list. You're excited.
I have tons of questions, but it's gone over an hour or so.
Go ahead. You can ask one more question.
Okay. Shoot. Okay. Are there a glut of indie publishing podcasts, or what kind of podcasts do you think that maybe the world is just dying for? Because you've got two.
Well, I can tell you exactly what the indie world is dying for. They're interested. If you can come up with a podcast that says, here's exactly what you have to do to sell 10 times more books, you would have a hit on your hands.
Sell More Book Show.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the Sell More Book Show with actionable information that actually worked for everyone. Because most people just want something that's really, really simple, and that it's a trick, and maybe takes 15 minutes in the morning on Tuesdays, and they get a 10x multiplier on the sales of their books. If you tell them you need to do this and this and this and this and this every single day for 6 months, and then you'll start to see a slow build in your sales, it's too much trouble.
Yeah, because Sell More Book Show is a great show, but of course it's more sort of a news aggregator than.
Yeah, I love the format of that show.
Yeah.
And I love all of the indie show podcasts because there's good information on all of them. But the shows that are the most popular, the episodes that get the most downloads, are the ones where here's the trick to do this, and
right. Click here to sell more books.
Yes. I'll just say it right now. My favorite podcast is Simon Whistler's The Rocking Self-Publishing podcast.
It's terrific.
The thing I like most about it is when he has an author on, you've never heard of him or her. She or he does not write romance. Wrote a book, got no sales. Wrote a second book, got a few more. Wrote a third, got a lot more, and a fifth, and now they're like buying mansions. Okay, that's the ones I like because those are the one that's the story that I want to happen with me, and there are a few of those shows that happen. That's what I like.
Are you up to your 5th book, John?
No, I'm on my 4th, and I'm writing a 5th.
Oh, you're almost there for the mansions.
That's
but
right.
They've all got to be in the same series, though, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm doing the whole multi-genre, but something's going to strike. I mean, whatever.
Well, write 2 more books. Go back to Jenkins and write 2 more.
Yeah, well, people seem to like it, but I gotta do some work on it. So covers and marketing strategy and stuff.
So speaking of our books, Erica, thanks so much for dropping by and helping us guest host tonight.
No worries.
And where would be the best place for people to sort of connect with you online?
Probably either to sign up to my mailing list on my website, which is ericaconroy.com, or to find my Facebook page, which, you just have to look up Erica Conroy, and there I am. And just join that. I'm not terribly interactive, but I do get back to people.
And what's you mentioned that you have a mega bundle on sale right now. What's that all about?
Yes, so it's the Callisto series. It's a sci-fi and romance series set around essentially the same starship and the different couples that pop up in an ongoing story arc. So it's been described, I think, a bit as like sci-fi adventure with romance. And the Callisto Mega Bundle is available at the moment from Amazon for 99 cents. So that's over 500 pages worth of stories.
Okay.
Wow.
And Stephen, how about you? Where's the best place for people to go looking for you on the internet?
The absolute best place is my personal website, which is stephenrcampbell.com, STEPHENR Campbell, CAMPBELL.com. There'll be links there to all the podcasts I do, and please sign up for my email list, and I'll let you know when these short stories come out.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. And,
thank you. It's been a treat being here.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week of reading, and we'll talk to you all soon. You guys have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.